Okay, Mike, thank you for joining me for this conversation on the very first module, Module 1, Introduction to COMETSA DJ's Broadcasters Development Program 2020-2021. I want us to just go through the points that we want to cover with our DJs and the broadcasters as we take them through the 3 hours of this module. So this is the module that everybody that is going to participate in the program will have to go through it. It's almost like about creation of an awareness around what is required for somebody to host a show as a DJ or a broadcaster. So we have plus minus 30 registered DJs and broadcasters into this program. And then we have again extended the opportunity to new members and the current members of COMETSA Friends and Supporters Club. Yeah. So the first point that we will be addressing is them as participants. That we want to spend a few minutes with them, introducing themselves to each other, so that they are becoming a cohort. Yeah, they are actually the guinea pigs. They are the first one to participate in this program. So they're going to spend a year almost and a couple of months together, starting from the 1st of November, finishing on the 31st of December 2021. So that is 12 months plus 2 months, that's 14 months. It's a very long program.
It is.
Yeah. So when you look at it, it's about 8-10 pages here. It's quite comprehensive.
It is.
What comes to your mind? Do you think we will be able to cover all these points in the 3 hours that we put together for the team?
Yes, I think we'll be able to cover them, because it's only a matter of just not going too much into detail.
Yes.
But also because it's still an introduction,
Yes.
the whole module content. So it's a matter of just checking out if are the co-host and the host aligning with us in terms of where we are and where we are going and where we're heading to. So I think it will align very well. 3 hours should be sufficient.
Yeah. So the many points that we are going to be raising in this introductory module, they are going to experience them as they practically host programs, prepare for the programs. But so that's the first focus is for them to enter into what we call team formation in terms of the Bruce Tuckman model of team development. We have the formation, which means they get to know each other. And then, of course, there are going to be times where they go into the storming, which is phase 2 of team development, norming, which is the phase 3, and then we want them to get to the phase 4 of team formation development, which is performance. We want them to perform very well as DJs and broadcasters collectively in our program. So that is the first thing we're going to do. Then we want to spend a little bit of time looking at the 3 main sub-programs of this program. The first program, there are those who are going to participate in the weekdays broadcasting programs, Mondays to Fridays. And each of those days have got times allocated to certain programs, which we have sent to them already. We will just remind them that Monday to Friday, these are the slots. Each one of them, over and above the identified slots, they can volunteer themselves to us as a production team to say they want to participate in that one because they have some learnings to do and they need the opportunity to practice, and therefore we schedule them for a particular show. Let's say, and ask an expert from COMETSA, that's a show. Or participate in the COMETSA methodology, that's a show. But they have their own specific shows once a month or once a weekend that they are assigned to, that they are going to develop and brand themselves around that. The second program is that we call it the 1st to 4th weeks monthly program, where each one of them in the first week or second week or third week have been identified to host that program once a month. That means they have a full month to plan for that program. And then as they plan for it, and then the day when the program is delivered, the next time they worry about the similar program, but obviously with a different guest or a different topic in the next month. That is the second program, and that's for me, that is the Rolls-Royce program. And all those programs happen every day, once a month, between 18 hours to 20 hours. The third program is the weekends program that is made up of Saturdays and Sundays. Each of those 2 days, every month weekend, also have slots, and I've got people that are dedicated to those programs. And they are mostly of Saturdays and Sundays programs are mostly sports, art and culture, music and entertainment. Because we want to tone down the temperatures, bring down the temperatures on weekends. And it will be really practically them addressing what is happening in the sporting fraternity, in the music fraternity, really in the country and broadly. So those are the 3 main programs. So when people ask you, what is COMETSA DJs Broadcasters Development Program 2020-2021, what is it made of? It's made of 3 programs. The weeks program, the once a month program, and the weekend program. So so basically those are the 3 chapters of this program.
Okay, that's cool.
We will then also talk to them about how important it is for them as the host to understand the roles of the various role players around their shows. Because in every show there is a host, and then there could be a co-host. There will be a production person, which is you, production manager, or station manager. Is the same thing for us for now. You're doubling on those 2 roles, and I'm also supporting on both production and station manager. So roles. So that means you and I, while we are actually facilitating that, we are also developing insights into how you product manage and how you station manage. So we are not just leading them, we are also developing the insights and the skills, because every show is going to be product produced by you and I and managed by you and I. Yeah. So our roles are quite very clear, but we need to make them understand what our roles are. They need to understand what their role as a host are, and the role of whoever they will have invited as a co-host, or whoever will have assigned as a co-host, what the role of a co-host is, and we will talk about that. And then, of course, the guest, who will be the guest of that particular show. So make sure that they are clearly understanding that, and each of them must engage with their roles, responsibilities, accountabilities as well. That is that. Now, the next point I want to... Is that clear?
Yes, it is.
In terms of the roles?
Yes, it is clear.
Is it understandable that also, as we go along for the whole 12 months to 14 months, we will be writing a script of those roles? We have the very much basic roles that we know. But every show we are going to learn and add and grow the spec of those various roles. Yeah.
Basically, this learning on the go.
It's learning on the go.
That's great.
So and that's why I like it, because we will always be doing post-mortems, and we'll be making notes, and everything will be recorded. So we are learning on the go, Yeah. So then the next point, as host of the program, I want to overemphasize the importance of preparation for the show. Nobody should rock into a show and think that things will just happen without having prepared. So the question is, how do you prepare for the show as a DJ, broadcaster, or a host, or a co-host? Out of the 14 sessions they will have, I'm talking about those who do programs once a month, you can imagine how they will have learned the rule and the importance of preparing, and how they will have led themselves a number of times where they did not prepare well. So that is a beautiful outcome that is intended there. Every person has different approaches to things, and we believe the same applies to the DJs and broadcasters as well. Their uniqueness must be maintained but be molded. And they must make sure that they develop their own approach to their own show. So we are not going to be restrictive, but we will guide. Out of that, then they come up with a standard template and use it as a guideline. So we want each one of them to say, this is my template, how I go about preparing for my shows. I've done it, it worked this way, it didn't work this way, I corrected it, now this is the guideline. So that post-2021, they could actually run workshops on how to prepare for a good show.
Exactly.
You don't want to be creating new approaches every time you host a show, because that will be disaster. That will confuse the listeners, because people must get used to how your approach is. Yeah. So that is the value of preparation. Now, the next point I want them to be aware of is what we call being fully present as a host of a show. And therefore, identify things that we must pay attention to during the show itself. And one of the main requirements for effective hosting and facilitation of a show is to be fully present. Yeah? Emotionally, mentally, physically, and otherwise. You have to be there. You can't be here and then your mind is somewhere. It will be disaster. So that means you must be awake at all the time through the show. And then you must make sure that the night before your show, you rest and sleep enough. Because you may want to be fully present, but if you are sleepy, you are not going to be fully present.
Exactly.
So you cannot ignore the importance of resting and sleeping enough the night before. Because otherwise you will not fulfill the requirement of being fully present. And we know that this is a challenge, as it is not their own activity in their professional life. Currently they are doing this part-time. Yeah? So however, they should try to balance their involvement in the week of their show. That particular week where they have a show, they really have to try and balance things. And if it becomes one day that they are full-time broadcasters, then they really have no choice. But this is now a mandatory. You can't come to a show tired or being drunk.
Exactly.
You understand, or not being ready. So you may also consider fitness programs to improve on your attention span. There might be a time where we say your work is very demanding, you need to be fit, you must eat well, and you must rest and go and do exercises. Yeah, that is a very important practice that we want them to take home with. The next point that we will address is that of self-development. As a DJ, as a broadcaster, how do you develop yourself into being efficient and effective DJ and broadcaster? You don't just want to be an average DJ and broadcaster. You want to be the effective broadcaster and DJ. That is not going to happen on its own if you don't develop yourself. So this is the role that requires their intellect. And that means applying their mind, and that requires energy. So our radio station expects the DJs and the broadcasters to engage on lifelong learning and qualify themselves, not only academically, but also through practice. And you as Mike now, being put into this digital space, the ICT space in COMETSA in the context of the fourth industrial revolution. A lot of things in the ICT from a 4IR point of view, I knew. There's no school where you can go and learn. There is, but majority of things are the things that you experience every day. That is a lifelong learning. Definitely. And from your experience right now, if I may ask, is there any script how to deal with technology? It changes every day.
It changes every day.
So that means your mind must be ready to learn.
Exactly.
The internet radio is at that stage.
Exactly.
Every day new products are being launched, and you've seen with our radio.co, our platform, every day they are launching new things. So if you don't have a mindset of lifelong learning, you're going to get tired because there's nothing that stays the same. We want our internet radio station, DG and broadcasters to understand that this is the type of industry we are in, and that's the industry of the future. All what we demand from them is that to be ready to learn new things.
Exactly.
Yeah. So therefore, the lifelong learning is a necessary practice they must have or engage in. As a host of shows, you must keep up with trends in specific topics and in general as well, because you are a mass media, and mass media have diverse interests within that group of masses that they are addressing. So reading, therefore, is the one sure way of addressing this demand. You can't be a successful DJ or a broadcaster if you are lazy to read. Exactly. And I'm not only just referring to reading newspapers, but reading books, reading articles. Yeah. Otherwise, you will fall short in some of the conversations you will be facilitating, because you might have a very well-read guest. Yeah, and the public out there is very well-read. It's a mix of people, but majority of people have access to information through internet, through Twitter, through LinkedIn, through Facebook. The information is on the fingertips. Yeah. So self-development is something that we expect from our DJs and from our broadcasters. The next point is that of managing the schedule. I know you have all the templates that you'll be managing and coordinating and putting together the shows as a producer, but they will have to know when is their schedule, when is their show, and they need to provide you with the speakers in time and topics in time. When you look at those templates, they are very well structured, but they are quite comprehensive. What did you pick up when you were looking at the templates that we want them to have in their files and follow?
The way they were structured, in terms of time, B, and date, so it's easy for me, and also it will be more easy, of course, by your guidance to work on them and edit on them. So, because it also reflects on my side to send out reminders. Yes. A month before the session, also get the topic and punch it there on the
calendar. So I think one way of helping them will be us in the office to take the schedule for the next month and then send them calendar invites. Yeah, based on the schedule, and on top of that, complete the schedule and send it to them so that everybody can see who has planned what topic with which speaker and which guest and which co-host.
Yes.
So that suggests that we can't work on a current month.
On a current month, yes, no.
In October, we need to be populating the schedule for November.
Yes.
Long before November starts. And in November, we need to be populating the schedule for December.
Yes.
So running a radio program, especially 24/7 internet radio station, is a 24/7 job. There's no starting time and finishing time. It's an integral thing, and it's a lifestyle thing. But if your broadcasters and the DJs collaborate very well with you, they will be able to have fun in it. And remember, in the background, we have auto DJ. If guys, colleagues, and ladies fail to be ready and their show doesn't take place, you know what we do. It's a fourth industrial revolution. Auto DJ takes over. But then, it's a bad message to people who have been expecting the show to happen. So how are you going to make sure that this schedule is managed and is enforced with them?
It's only a matter of getting confirmation and sending reminders, and also informing them in terms of, it can either be 2 weeks before, and a week before, and a day before, and also 2 hours before the show. I also need to send out reminders and call them that your show starts in 2 hours to come.
Yes.
Are you ready?
Yes.
So that we can work out on a thing. If he's not ready, that person, you can also get another option in terms of informing the listeners that this show won't happen in time.
Yes. Yeah. I'm talking to that later on this presentation. That's a very, very valuable point. And remember also that most of them are hosting monthly, and then there are others are hosting weekly. So the pressure on the weekly people is much higher than the pressure on the monthly people. But the impact and the magnitude of the monthly program does require a longer planning. While the week in, week out is like we want to quick update what's going on in the sports fraternity or in the music or arts environment, or it's lesser controlled and supervised than the monthly program, because the monthly programs these are our Rolls-Royce programs. And they are like enterprises they are running. Well, the weekly ones as well. It's just that the weekly one is like volume business, whereas the monthly programs are like quality programs.
Quality programs.
Yeah, so the pressure will be different. And then all of them will be exposed to this, by the way, because some of them will be the co-host and the guest of each other. So they will get to experience the different environment. So they must try as hard as possible not to drop the ball, because we will record the number of times the ball get dropped, and the radio statistics will show when the particular show did not happen. That slot will have a lesser number of listeners. Yeah, great stuff. So the next one is then I want to talk to them about taking their slots and their shows as if it's their enterprises. And that means that one of the first things you do when you run an enterprise, you make sure that your enterprise is promoted. Your products are marketed. Your services are marketed. So promotion of their show, it's not the only responsibility of the station manager and the production manager in the COMETSA office. It is really their main responsibility. So they need to think about how they are going to augment the efforts of the COMETSA office in promoting and marketing their shows. And they need to think of things like digital marketing, using their own social media platforms, posting their shows. We'll put together the e-flyers and all the various things we do to give them links that they can just send around so that their programs will be marketed. We will sometimes publish them on Facebook and even promote them through paying so that it can get there. So I think this is going to be fun. Yeah.
Yes, no, it's a great plan that needs a serious execution in terms of finishing it. If we just follow this plan, obviously we will be able to conquer the radio and also dominate everything.
Absolutely, and that will mean also they also need to have a special interest on making sure their social media accounts are active and they are engaging. So that is another take home. Then the next point that I will address is the collaboration with us, the production team, and I think we have touched on that. This is it. This is where it will rise and fall on. That is the collaboration between the show hosts and the production team in the COMETSA office is really the determining factor. And it will show to the listeners and to ourselves and to them if we have not collaborated well, when it fails to reach its expectations, that we have not really worked together very well. So we need to have a joint planning, even if it's telephonic, between the two teams, even including few minutes before the show, just to make sure that is everything okay. Yeah. So that is mandatory that we work before the actual show so that we avoid disaster from happening. Because we don't want our listeners to be disappointed because we didn't do the planning. Yeah. Let's move now to the sourcing of guests for the show. You and I can take it for granted that it's very easy for them just to look around and find a guest to be invited to the show. That doesn't work like that. It's not everybody that you come across that you're just bringing in as a show, as a guest. They need to think seriously about how are they going to source this guest for their monthly shows. They need to identify the sources of guests. Do you go to conferences? Do you go to the Google? Do you go to LinkedIn? They need to build a database of potential guests. So on the go every time, and I think we might even encourage them to start having their business cards, their own business cards, say a DJ broadcaster at COMETSA Radio. Yeah, obviously that is their own choice.
Yes.
So that they are able to engage with the potential guests as they move around in their professional work. And therefore, once they've identified those potential guests, they must contact them, give them heads up to say, I think I would want to invite you to my show at COMETSA Radio. Here's the link. Visit the COMETSA Radio, listen to it, and let me know if you are interested.
Yes. I think based on that, I think also the sourcing guests for the show, it reflects very well on that. Will that person, that guest we brought to our radio, will it deliver the content or the topic that is assigned to that co-host?
Exactly. So we need to look at the criteria, and we're going to talk about it there as well. What makes you think this person that you've just met at this conference or in the train will make it? So that means you need to know what you're looking for, right?
Exactly.
So they must make sure that they know they get the email addresses and the mobile numbers, the landline numbers of these people, and follow them on social media like LinkedIn, and then put together their own plan. I've got 12 programs in a year. I need 12, not only 12, I'll show you later on that they need to have always a backup.
Yes.
If you only have 12 people targeted, you might get 6. But if you have 24 people, at least you end up with 15 people. So your shows will happen. Because we want to teach them also to plan the whole year. Because it's going to be tough if they're going to be planning month in, month out, because they may not be able to source good guests. So that's an interesting challenge. You have just addressed the next point, which is the guest criteria. They need to work out the criteria that they will be using to identify, select, and invite the guests. Yeah? So they need to go beyond technical qualifications and look at things like personality of the potential guest, the experience that they possess, the reputation that they have in the public and in their sector, the energy levels that they have in themselves. You know, when somebody has got the energy, you see when you talk to them that this person has got energy, is vibrant, so you will inspire my speakers. The ability to express themselves. Communication is very, very important, and their confidence level in I will almost say in front of the microphone. But your energy transmitted through your voice can do magic in listeners far away. So people must not think, I'm not in front of these people, I can just be sloppish. No, your voice carries and communicates a lot about the state of energy level you are at. So it's quite very important that these are just ideas, but they have to look more beyond than what we are giving. Is the person's interest right? Is this person interested in the type of work and the show that you are running? And are they willing to volunteer their knowledge? Yeah, because we don't want people that feel like they are forced to come into the radio station. Do they have the passion for the topic you are asking them to address? Yeah. And then, of course, the willingness to share their sources of those topics. If you bring a topic to the show and people are very interested in, or we are interested in, and we want to explore more of that topic, you must be able to share the source so that we can empower our listeners. So the criteria is very, very critical, and that's what we will share with them and encourage them. And by the way, all these points we are raising in this introductory module, we are going to be observing if they are practicing them throughout the whole 14 months. This is like your hymn sheet. Every time the show happens, every time we do follow-up programs in our modules, we will be looking at this. Every month we will have a particular module that we will put together, and then but this is the basics, this is fundamental. Building relationship with guests is another point. And I'm talking about the current guests that you are inviting, that are coming, the past guests that have been to your show, and the future guests, the potential guests. It is very important that they build a relationship. They need to be very strategic and not approach the guest when it is too late. You know what I mean? And then you are already desperate for a guest, and then you're going to get up anybody you come across because you haven't built a relationship. You don't have many options. You know? So we want as the broadcaster to understand that they need to give these people enough time to prepare for their shows. And of course, in many cases, they don't have to worry about approaching those people. As long as they've spoken to these people, they've acquired their contact details and given them a heads up about potential invitation coming from the COMETSA office, because we don't want our hosts and DJs to be the one inviting the guests, because then they will not be able to give them quality service. We want them to say, Michael, here's the potential guest I spoke to, here's the business card, I want to invite them for the show next month. And then the office does the invitation, the follow-up, so that they can be looked up. They must feel the touch of high-touch level service by COMETSA Radio in support of our DJs and broadcasters. How is that sitting with you?
I think it's a great initiative, also because I'll be able to manage the relationship between the guest and the host and our office also. Because the communication will be coming from me at the office. It means it must be more appropriate in terms of how we're gonna welcome them in the radio. Because it starts with a simple communication from the get-go.
Yes.
On how we're gonna work going forward.
Yes.
So I think it would be great.
And it's also very good for us in building the database of contracts and offering aftercare. And then also, it's very important that we cross-refer the guest. A guest might come for host ESME, and we find that this guest but is actually can also be recommended to Ingrid's show or Patrick's show. So if it's in the central at your office, we are able to actually to have a growing pool of guests that our hosts can recommend or that you approach them. Great stuff. So that is very, very important. So they need to build that relationship. And then I'm also suggesting that they need to line up 2 replacement guests for each guest, to avoid being totally dropped in the last hours of their show. So if you need 1 guest and 2 co-hosts, two supporting guests. If you need 2 guests to come into your show, that's going to be mostly the standard. Then you must have 2 other guests readily available for that particular topic and prepared. So that if the other person is taken away by other commitments, you are not going to start looking for guest speakers in the last minute. But if you don't build relationship with these guests, you might not be able to replace people in the last minutes.
Exactly.
Yeah. Exactly. So they must be in touch with their main and replacement guests a week. That's what I suggest. A week before the show, 3 days then before the show, and then a day before the show, and then the morning of the show. And as you said, an hour or so before the show to check whether the guy is really getting ready for the show.
Exactly.
Because you don't want to say we're waiting for the guest and then the guest doesn't come, and then the listener says, but have you been actually checking whether this guy is still available or not? So that is very, very important, and you did suggest that, and there it is, we've captured it, and we feel that is a very good strategy. And this is more so if the guest is popular and we have promoted them openly in the public. The listeners are now waiting. That such a hot guest, you can't drop the listeners in the last minute. It will damage the reputation of the show, the reputation of the host, and the reputation of the station. We can't allow that. Okay, good stuff. Done with the building relationship with guests. Let's come to the networking as a resource. We expect each of our DJs and broadcasters to be very good at building networks. Good talk show hosts are great networkers. They do this naturally. It is their character, it's their way of being. And if the people are not at that level, we want them to start considering really developing that skill. So these good networkers, they know the movers in their sectors on first names. You don't have to go through protocol to reach out these people if you build good relationship. So they must aim to develop themselves into a top-level networker, then nurture those relationships. Be intentional about building their database of great guest speakers. Yeah, the next point that I want to address is I call it gratitude, thank you, and post-show service. It sounds very less important, but this is powerful emotionally. Yeah, be humble and appreciate your guest from the show 2 days maximum after the show. Send them a thank you note personally, so that when COMETSA office later write official thank you, at least you as the host, we have dropped them a WhatsApp and say thank you very much. It was wonderful having you at my show last night. But I'm sure the office will make some official follow-up with you. So that must be built in their way of building the relationship with their guests. Yeah. So then I've listed a number of what I call conducts. How do you conduct yourself when you are hosting a show for our radio, COMETSA Radio? First contact number 1 is self-introduction. Introduce yourself to the guests and the listeners. That's very, very important. Greeting in our culture is is the beginning of everything. Plan your personal introduction as well. Don't, when the show is about to start and then you wonder how to introduce yourself. Because every show is going to be different depending on the topic. So people may think that I just have my one page a profile, the same page and profile I'm using every day. You will be amazed. You can't introduce yourself the same. We don't say create unfounded stories about yourself. But think about the 3-4 lines you're going to use to introduce yourself for each and every show. Yeah? So don't feel restricted, but do not steal the thunder. Definitely. That is a warning. Don't spend too much time telling your listeners and your guests how great you are. We know how great you are. But 2-3 liners that are related to this topic, and then people will understand that. Then that way people start building knowledge about it. And then share your credentials that are appropriate, as I said, for that particular show. If you're hosting a show on leadership, show your credentials. How did you experience leadership in your own life? And which qualification did you take that is related to leadership? And then recommend certain best programs, and then leave it to the guest, because make sure you refer your listeners as a host to your own professional social media accounts for those who want to know more about you. That's sufficient. Yeah. So that's the contact number 1. Contact number 2 is introducing co-hosts. You must, as a host, a DJ, introduce your co-host to the listeners and the guests. Don't invite somebody to become a co-host and then you don't introduce them, and halfway in the program say, I wonder if my co-host has got any comment to make. And who is he or who is she? So that means you are not equal. You are saying that I'm the boss and the co-host is just a spare wheel. No. Our co-hosts are not spare wheel. The only difference is that it is not their show. But they are equally special as co-hosts, because they have their own, probably they have their own show somewhere where they are not co-hosts. So they are unique in their own right. So be respectful and acknowledge your co-host by introducing them to your guests and listeners. And if they are comfortable, your co-hosts, allow them to say a few words about themselves, and they must also then refer listeners to their social media platform for further insights. Because here at COMETSA Radio, we want our listeners and our hosts to be connected, to build that bond. And therefore, you do that over time. That is contact number 2. Contact number 3, get into the practice of really be professional in the way you introduce your guests. Yeah? Introduce your guests to the listeners. It is not your guest. It's the guest of the listeners. You are just hosting them. That is how it's supposed to be looked at. So you are representing the listeners. You must introduce the guests in a way that the listeners feel respected. So this is the big moment at the beginning of the show. You win or lose listeners right at this moment. So don't oversell. That's the most important thing. But don't undersell as well your guest. There may be listeners out there who know your guest more than you have researched or you know the guest. So after saying few remarks on your guest, allow them to expand on your introduction remarks about themselves. They know themselves much better than you do. Always remember to leave enough time for your guest to say something about themselves during that introduction space. It is them who are at the center of your show. So let them enjoy their moment. That is the value proposition that makes them to want to volunteer their time, insight, knowledge, and experience. Yeah? So it is a very, very important part of the show before you even start. Now let's get to conduct number 4. This is almost mandatory. Introduction of the COMETSA radio station. Yeah? It is mandatory that our hosts introduce the radio station to the listeners and their guests. Any DJ, any broadcaster that is hosting guests, after introducing the guests, introducing themselves, they must introduce COMETSA radio station, because we don't know when we are having unique listeners out there. Unique listeners being the listeners who are tuning in for the first time. So don't say, people know the station. That it will be the biggest mistake you are doing. And by the way, our station is reaching out globally. So this is a standard preparation we've put together for the guest for our host to introduce the radio station. We at COMETSA will not forgive any host or a DJ of ours for failing to introduce COMETSA Radio to our listeners. Here's the text that we want them to use. So we're saying, relax, slowly, loud and clear, tell the people who COMETSA radio station is. We are the radio station that is listed with at Music in Africa, and they can check our profile at musicinafrica.net. But who is COMETSA Radio? COMETSA Radio is a business, entrepreneurship, and professional management services, 24/7 internet streaming radio station, broadcasting from South Africa to the world, for South Africans and the world at large. We broadcast music, entertainment, and talk shows across the world. By entertainment, I'm referring to art, culture, music. It could be film, it could be any sort of entertainment. Our objective is to use the African storytelling and Lekgotla conversation methodology in offering career coaching, education, learning guidance, continuous professional development, enterprise development, entrepreneurship development, and connecting demand with supply. Our talk shows aim to affirm and support businessmen and women, entrepreneurs, and professionals in their personal and professional journey of bringing difference to the world. These are talk shows that recognize excellence and greatness. We have a network of associates, members, and stakeholders who know our quality standards and therefore make recommendations to our production team. The conversations become lifelong account of our guests' work. The stories also aim to tell the humane side of these businessmen and women, entrepreneurs and professionals by demonstrating that they are not special human beings. They too started from humble beginnings, and we can all emulate them. We are building a solid ecosystem of businessmen and women, entrepreneurs and professionals that are committed to the empowerment of others, collaboration across sectors, sharing of insights and knowledge, building a base for succession and inheritance, and safeguarding the legacies for generations after us. That is our duty and responsibility. We want potential customers to know about the products, services, and solutions available in this ecosystem that we are building. This is an enterprise and professional development program, EPDP, initiative that knows no borders. Music played by COMETSA Radio is world music and it appeals to all the people of the world. We are therefore a truly African radio station with a global reach and appeal. That is the standard introduction that we would like our DJs and broadcasters to repeat number of times in every show so that we empower our listeners with the understanding of what type of an internet radio station we are. Yeah? I think this is beautiful, and I think it clearly explains to the world out there what we are and what we stand for.
Yes, it is. It is, and it is clear in terms of what is the purpose of the radio.
Yeah.
And what are the benefits in terms of listening to it.
Yeah.
Or getting invited as a guest.
Absolutely.
So it's quite clear on the content that it's offering.
Great. Absolutely. So that is standard. And then conduct number 5 is checking in. Like in coaching, when you host a program, we expect you to develop, as a host, to develop your way of checking into the show. Don't pounce into it. You may first reflect on your For instance, on your previous show and its topic, or the other show by a fellow DJ that you participated in or listened to, or a comment on the local and global current affairs might be used to settle down the guests. The key here is to get your guests start the show by talking about something unrelated to the topic to address at the show. Remember, they have been preparing for your show a couple of days before. Their system is already fatigued, and naturally they are tense because they want to do so well. So if you just pounce into it, you are actually just plunging them into the fear that they are already anticipating. By talking about something a little bit unrelated, they are trying, there will be help to settle down, because by nature they are trying too hard in their mind to be perfect. Yeah? As a host, that's an art, how to introduce the show. Therefore, checking in is very important. Contact number 5 is what we call facilitate. Focus on facilitating the show. Use the Lekgotla methodology to keep yourself in check. That's why we encourage our DJs and our facilitators and hosts to participate in the monthly Lekgotla shows, programs of COMETSA as part of their development of this skill, so that they are able to really learn to facilitate. They must aim not only to become good DJs and broadcasters, they must also aim to become good facilitator of conversations. And I believe that will give them additional opportunities in commerce and industry as celebrity DJ broadcasters to even be invited to come over and facilitate business conversations. Yeah. So being a host and facilitator, it does not mean that you are the center. You just facilitate. Conduct number 6 is what we call affirm and motivate. Our DJs and broadcasters must learn to affirm and motivate the guest in the middle of the show as the show happens, because they must, as this guest hit high notes and mention some profound statements, they must affirm them and motivate them, because that is what the listeners want. The role of the host is to help the guest to reach their best level of performance. Yeah. We want them to uplift the listeners out there to the highest level of energy vibration. Now, if you are a facilitator, you are over-interjecting. People are not interested. They know you are a regular host. They can still listen to you tomorrow. They have this guest who's coming for the first time. They want that guest to play guitar, and they want to dance to that unique melodies that are coming out of this new guitar played by this host that is coming for the first time. Yeah? Beautiful. So conduct number 7 is called lead conversations. So your performance yardstick as a host is how you lead the flow of the conversation. A good host and facilitator recognizes when the conversation is flowing with a particular idea and allows it to be explored to the end, or package it in a way that meets the desires of the listeners. Disruption when the guest is in a flow and the listeners are enjoying the conversation is hated by most stakeholders. And many inexperienced facilitators do that mistake. They don't know when to come in. When the show is flowing, when the car is cruising, why do you fiddle with the gears? Just put it on the cruise and then enjoy the ride. Definitely. That is the analogy that I will use. Yeah. Conduct number 8 is a follow-up. Follow up on inputs to verify views. You are there and listening to what the guest is saying, and then he mentions something, you follow up with it. A host who is a good listener will recognize a new or an alternative input offered by the guest and make a follow-up with the guest to unpack it more. That is melody to the listeners, because now you are doing exactly what they said. The host gives this, and you say, give more. Moving away from a new insightful input is interference with the learning process. Remember, the listeners are not with you. They are in the background. You say, at this level, I can imagine somebody say, I wish this person can just tell more, because now this is what I want to hear. If you are connected, your energy is connected with the guest, I can bet you are also connected with the listeners. By the way, our radio station is able to show statistics on the go. As we are having the show, we'll be seeing the numbers of the listeners. If the numbers of the listeners drop, we know that we are not hitting the high notes. If the listeners are going up, as a host, as a production manager, we will be able to tell them, and we will know as producers, and we can drop an SMS and WhatsApp and sit on that because, hey man, the numbers is just growing up. The graph of listeners is going up. That is the work of us as producers. Yeah. Conduct number 9 is challenge respectfully. This is very fundamental. As a host and a DJ and a facilitator, you are required and you are expected to challenge any inputs and thoughts that are not supported by any evidence or facts. However, you must challenge the guest respectfully. That is always important. You are not there to embarrass the guest. You are not there to show the guest how much you know. You are not there to show the guest how little they know. You are not there for point scoring with the guest. You are there to get how much they can offer. And every guest will be different. Conduct number 10 is called debates versus arguments. As a host, you must allow debates but do not enter into destructive arguments. It is healthy to debate, but debate must lead to resolving issues. Yeah? The Lekgotla conversation methodology is appropriate for facilitating debate and resolving arguments. Yeah? So we will continue holding Lekgotla sessions to build capacity among our DJs and broadcasters. And I think as a production manager and the station manager of this radio, it's very important to keep on reminding the DJs and the broadcasters that there is a lot for them to learn from our monthly Lekgotla sessions in terms of how to go about facilitating using the Lekgotla methodology. And make sure that they receive invitations.
Definitely.
Yeah. Conduct number 11, a good facilitator, a good host, a good DJ is a good listener. That's listening. As a facilitator, hosts speak less and listen more. Expand on the thoughts and inputs from the guests rather than being the one introducing new thoughts. Yeah. Don't talk too much and overshadow your guests and co-hosts. Yeah. Conduct number 12, not eating. Very important. Avoid eating during the show. If it was the traditional radio, we said no eating in the studio. But our studio is virtual. So you can't say it's virtual, therefore you are hosting a show, in the process you are eating. The listeners will pick it up that you are eating in the show. And that is very insulting. Only drinking can be allowed, but keep liquids far from the equipment. Because the water can fall onto your equipment you are using, and then voila, we have a challenge. Because we will hear your screams or unintended sounds as a result of water spilling over your equipment that you are using to conduct the show. Yeah, so it's very important that it's practice. Conduct number 13, focus. Just pretend you are entering a physical studio and do not allow anyone around you to obstruct your attention. If you allow that, you will lose your trail of thought in many cases. That can be embarrassing for you, and then you will lose the respect of the listeners as a DJ and facilitators. Yeah. Conduct number 14, mobile phone. Put your mobile phone on silent, not vibrate, because the listeners will hear your mobile phone when it vibrates. Don't try to check your incoming text messages and notifications during the show. You may pick up a disturbing notification that will throw you out of balance. You don't want that to happen while you are a host, you know. Conduct number 15, authenticity. Try to be authentic and original as a host or a co-host. Do not choreograph the show. Yeah? Plan for the show, but do not choreograph it. Let the show take its natural flow. Yours is to set the framework and parameters within which your show will be allowed to fluctuate. Allow the highs and lows during the show, and let the listeners feel the emotions as generated by the participants in the show. And they will feel it. Yeah? Conduct number 16 is projection. Remember that you are the eyes and ears of the listeners as a host and a facilitator and a DJ. So let them experience the show as if they are in the studio with you. If you must express a dismay or anxiety, do so on behalf of the listeners. That is, project the show to the listeners. If you talk too much and not be observant, you will not be able to represent the emotions of the listeners. That is what facilitation is all about. That is, listen, observe, notice, relay the experience to the listeners, and bring back that experience from the listeners to the participants in the show. It is like role-playing a movie. And you will feel it. The atmosphere, the environment, the energy will be in you, and you will beat at the same pace with the listeners without you seeing it. Conduct number 17 is called respect. Do not interrupt when one of the guests is still talking. I know this is a challenge for the hosts and facilitators and many DJs because it is not easy. If you find out that you have interrupted someone, apologize before occupying that unfairly gained space. Yeah? Refer to our Logota conversation methodology. It's very useful in this regard. Once you are known as a host who respects guests, you will be sought after. Don't forget that our radio has a global reach. Who knows? Your talent might be identified by other reputable global broadcasters. This might be a launching pad of a career in internet broadcasting and podcasting. Yeah. Conduct number 18, promotion. Think through how you are going to promote your show among your own network. The radio system is automatically going to generate listenership statistics for your show, so you will be able to observe the growth or decline in your listenership. We can tell how many people listened to your show, from which countries in the world, and how long they stayed on your show. That's the power of our platform. Conduct number 19, make your show go viral. Each show will be converted into a podcast at COMETSA Radio Podcast with you, the DJ or broadcaster, as an author of your episode. That's a beautiful opportunity. The podcast gets published at iTunes, that's Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Deezer, TuneIn, Stitcher, etc. and etc. So our platform, podcast.co, will produce daily download statistics of your podcast and report on which of our podcasts are leading on downloads. So you will receive the link of your podcast and you can aggressively distribute it on your own social media platforms for it to go further viral. That is what digital marketing is all about. So you are welcome to request statistics on your podcast at any point in time, because at any point in time we will be able to give it to you. Yeah. Conduct number 20 is sourcing interest. Apply your mind on how you are going to go about identifying inviting guests. I think we've addressed this. We are repeating it. What is your show's value proposition to the guest you are targeting is very important. And in most cases, people want to know that your show and the radio station attracts big and broader interest. It will give them unique experience, exposure, popularity, and of course, a copy of the podcast mentioned in the public notification, etc. and etc. So you are welcome to explore the membership of COMETSA Friends and Supporters Club NPO for subject matter experts from whom to identify potential guests. So that's I think we've mentioned that before, but that is another option you can look at. Conduct number 21 is guest criteria. Have we not addressed it? We did address it earlier on, right?
We addressed it when we were just having a conversation.
Yes.
It wasn't. We didn't address it now on this.
In detail. Okay.
Yes.
So we're saying that our host must develop the criteria that they are going to use to accept or reject guests. They must be transparent so that they cannot be blamed for applying favoritism. I think that's the reason why we are bringing it back. That we don't want favoritism to be applied, because everybody who's qualifying, who's got something to offer, must be given opportunity. Mm-hmm. And as at COMETSA, we do not support any practice of favoritism, nepotism, corruption, even tribalism or racism or sexism. So we expect everybody that qualifies to be given the opportunity. And that's the reason why we bring it back. So conduct number 22 is the subject matter experts. We encourage you as a host to put priority on subject matter expertise when inviting guests. Over and above the guest criteria, we will require the profiles of the guests and 2 referees to approve the guests as production team. Conduct number 23, reputation. We recommend the guest whose reputation is without questions. Do your own desk research on every potential guest that is recommended to your show, especially if you do not know them personally. Conduct number 24, networking. You must not only get in touch with people and build relationship when you need them to be your guests. I think we also addressed this earlier on. Start seriously practicing professional networking and building of relationships with such personality who will be interested in your show and becoming your guests. Mm. It is easy to invite people that you have built relationship with them. That's very, very important. Why networking must be one of the conduct. Conduct number 25 is aftercare. We also address this one. You should contact your guests 2 days after the show to thank them for their time, contribution, share the podcast link of the show with them, encourage them to consider becoming a regular guest at their show and other shows at COMETSA Radio. If you believe that they may contribute to other DJs' shows, therefore refer the guest to them, preferably via the production team at COMETSA office. We also want our guests to consider membership with COMETSA Friends and Supporters Club, NPO, and therefore they should also be referred to our online application form platform at www.cometsaclub.africa, and they can follow steps under membership and then populate the form. Or they can go directly to our portal, which is www.cometsafriendsandSupportersClub.wildapricot.org, and go to join us, and then everything will happen online until the last stages. Conduct number 26 is planning and implementation. All successes and or failures can be ascribed to lack of or poor planning. As the saying goes, failure to plan is planning to fail. You do not want to regret for failing to thoroughly plan for the show. Rather, over-plan than not planning at all. So it does not mean that everything you will have planned to accomplish in the show will be achieved. However, a plan is an orientation that you try to follow, and if you plan to reach high levels and then you fail, you will at least arrive at the middle way. But if you do not plan at all, you may not even take off. Mm. Yeah? And that will spell a disaster for your show. Mm. Yeah? Very, very important. And that's the quality that we don't want to compromise on. We want every time people come into your show, plan high so that they can land in the middle. And that way, we can really build their quality. But if they don't plan at all, it's like they want to play the game that they didn't practice for.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that's hopeless from the beginning. So conduct number 27 is know your speaker. Oh, this is beautiful. This is very, very important. Don't take your speakers or your guests for granted. Even if you know the guests, you still need to go to read a little bit about them because you'll be surprised. And I think we've addressed this earlier on, but let's go into it. Take time to study the profiles of your guests, because profiles of guests are dynamic. They don't remain the same. Yeah, people acquire new things and they change, and they take new responsibilities. Research them on Google. Most reliable source of people's state of being, current state of being. Ask their colleagues or their network on LinkedIn for a bit of views on them. However, avoid being corrupted by their private life that is being accidentally shared with you. So as you invest, you research people, don't be too blind. Be aware of sometimes when people create unfounded stories and damage the reputation of people. Don't just take information on face value. You can even sometimes verify them with the guests themselves before you present it to the listeners. Definitely. That is not the objective of. That's not our objective of researching our guests to communicate negative stories of our guests. Try to be objective and fair in using that information you've acquired through this exercise. Be professional and do not go about discussing your guests with people who have nothing to do with your show. Yeah, because you are getting this information and you are going to use it. It's a privilege. Your aim is to understand your guests so that you can present them to your audience, listeners, and extract valuable lessons from them on behalf of your listeners. Your listeners will love you for being professional in the way you go about facilitating their learning from your show. Yeah. Conduct number 28, set rules and principles. Develop your own principles and rules for your show in line with COMETSA values and principles. And we will make sure that our DJs and broadcasters receive the COMETSA rules and principles and then study them, because and that will be a foundation on which they can develop their own values and their own principles for their own shows. And then we expect them to stick to their values and principles, and that of COMETSA as well. They must let their guests, listeners, and other stakeholders know about these principles. They can always repeat them at their shows, And that is what will build the culture and identity of their shows and enhance the value proposition of COMETSA Radio. Conduct number 29, hold briefings. As a host, a DJ, a broadcaster, do not fall into a trap of being too overconfident and underestimate the value of holding briefings with your guests, producers, co-hosts, and performing dry runs before the show. That is part of that planning we're talking about. You have nothing to lose, but only gain from holding briefings and performing dry runs with few fellow colleagues or peer mentors and coaches. Yeah? You will be surprised by the value you will extract from such practice. You will grow faster than you will have expected. Agree with your guests, production team, co-hosts, and support teams on the approach you are going to follow at your show. This is very, very important. Don't surprise them at the show. Talk to them about it before it happens. Yeah? Conduct number 30 is read and watch news. There is nothing worse to handling a topic that is related to breaking news and you have missed it in the day. Your listeners will feel undermined and disrespected. However, it is enough to check just the headlines and the trending hashtags to be relevant in facilitating the conversation. And you appear very intelligent, yeah, but not to know what is trending at all on the show, on the topic that you are hosting at your show. That is irresponsible. And that's why it is very important to have a chat with your guest speaker an hour before to check if there are any developments that may require adjustment of the plans for the show. Yeah. Don't have your guests arriving on top of the hour of starting the show. Get connected with them long before that. An hour is very quick when you are going to host a 3-hour show. Yeah?
Definitely.
Or 2-hour show. Conduct number 31, represent the listeners. Remember that you are there for the listeners as a host, not for yourself.
Exactly.
You may want to ask questions or engage on issues that appeal to you, but not relevant for the listeners. Be disciplined not to push your own agendas as a facilitator, as a host or a DJ. Ask yourself the question, what will the listeners want to know or learn from this guest? And what type of questions will unlock that for them? And then ask exactly those questions. Because you are representing the listeners. It is not your show. Yes, you are hosting it, but you are there for the listeners. Contact number 32, being fully present. I think we addressed this as well.
Yes.
This means that physically and emotionally, engage actively with the guest on behalf of your listeners. Your remarks, responses, follow-up questions must suggest that you are applying active listening and you are fully present. And therefore, that's why I'll refer you back to contact number 13, which talks about focus. Contact number 33, manage time. That is also manage schedule. We spoke about that. Facilitating, now we are talking about managing time during the show. Facilitating shows that involve more than one guest is very difficult to fit in prescribed times. 2-3 hours is nothing for 3 people talking. People by nature enjoy talking and being listened to. Make sure that your rules and principles include adherence to time and what to do when the guests go over time. Yeah? Very important. In advance, discuss it. Remember to put aside specific times for introductions at the beginning, checking in and checking out. These 3, you cannot eat into this, as they are the foundations of your show. If you fail to have introductions, and you fail to have check-ins, and you have failed to have check-out, 50% of your show is gone. Yeah. That is fundamental to facilitating and hosting a show. You must know how to kickstart the show, how to welcome guests, how to introduce people, and how to wrap up the show. Yeah. So, source 34. Conduct 34. I don't know why I call it source 34. Source of topics, we've mentioned that. We've spoken about source of guests. Now let's talk about source of topics. We are very privileged at COMETSA that we have what we call our online shop that is going to be launching very soon. So as members of COMETSA and participants in the COMETSA DJ Broadcasters Development Program, our participants have access to our online shop to search through the topics that they can use to decide on what topics to formulate for their shows. And that online shop is the address is www.comesa-goc.com/shop, and that will be available effective from the 1st of November 2020. Yeah. The last contact is contact number 35, checking out. I've just addressed that. Never make a mistake of skipping the checking out as a host. You will have lost the opportunity to sum up your show. Otherwise, it will be like completing building the house but leaving out the roof. Yeah, that will not be the house. Yeah. So that is it, and we encourage also then our host when they close their show to remind the listeners that it's very easy for them next time when they want to come back, and this is how they tune in. They go to www.cometsaradio.com, and that will take them straight into our mobile streaming. That is our introduction module, and I hope it is going to be very exciting for the participants to go through it. We will share this podcast with them, and I don't know if it is strike the chord with you, Mr. Mulava.
I think we are getting somewhere in terms of working, going forward, working with our co-host and also guests.
Yeah.
So basically, with this module, we'll be able to learn more deeper into detail on how we're gonna align together, three of us, the production team, the co-host, the host, and also the guest, and how we're gonna work on going forward.
Here's the idea. That was module 1. The rest of the modules are made up of all these points I've listed. So we are going to take each of these points, every month, and expatiate more. How do you go about building a network? That is a module on its own. So we have laid out the 14 months program syllabus by going through this introductory module. I'm very excited about it. Even myself, as a seasoned facilitator, I'm sure I'm going to learn a thing or two from our own participants in the program. Thank you very much for your interest and partnering with me as I was going through all these chapters of our entire course, packaged in the form of an introductory module. So I look forward and you joining me tomorrow in a session with our DJs and broadcasters. I look forward to your continued participation.
All right, thank you.
Lovely.
Looking forward to tomorrow.
Beautiful.
All right.